General Morrison's career was built on taking credit for other people's accomplishments, especially the women he dismissed as incompetent. Staff Sergeant Claire Adams had watched him do it for years, staying silent to protect classified operations. But when he tried to steal credit for her most dangerous mission, she decided it was time to remind everyone who really deserved those medals. General Robert Morrison was everything wrong with military leadership, wrapped in a perfectly pressed uniform and covered in medals he hadn't earned. At 55, he had built a reputation as a tough, no-nonsense commander who got results, but those who worked closest to him knew the truth. Morrison was a master at taking credit for other people's work while ensuring that anyone who might challenge him was either transferred, demoted, or discredited. Which city in the world are you watching this video from today? Please subscribe and support us for more stories. Morrison's favorite targets were female soldiers whom he systematically undermined through a combination of impossible assignments, public humiliation, and career sabotage disguised as military discipline. He had perfected the art of destroying women's careers while maintaining plausible deniability, ensuring that his actions appeared to be based on legitimate performance concerns rather than obvious gender discrimination. Staff Sergeant Claire Adams had been assigned to Morrison's command 18 months earlier, and from her first day, she had been subjected to his systematic campaign of professional destruction. Morrison assigned her to mundane administrative tasks despite her qualifications for operational roles, publicly criticized her performance in front of other soldiers, and consistently rated her as inadequate in performance evaluations that contradicted her actual accomplishments. What Morrison didn't know was that Claire Adams was not the ordinary staff sergeant she appeared to be. Her assignment to his command was not random bad luck, but a carefully orchestrated placement designed to gather evidence about his pattern of misconduct and corruption. Claire was actually one of the military's most decorated covert operatives, with a classified service record that included some of the most dangerous and successful missions in recent military history. Claire's real identity was known only to a handful of senior officials who were investigating widespread corruption within Morrison's command structure. Her assignment was to observe and document Morrison's activities while maintaining her cover as an ordinary soldier struggling with routine military duties. The investigation had been ongoing for over a year, and Claire's reports had provided crucial evidence about Morrison's systematic theft of credit for operations he had never participated in. The pattern of Morrison's career advancement was clear to anyone who examined his record closely. Every major accomplishment on his resume corresponded to successful operations commanded by subordinates who had subsequently been transferred, demoted, or forced out of military service. Morrison had built his reputation by stealing credit for other people's achievements while ensuring that the real heroes were silenced or discredited. Claire's background made her uniquely qualified to understand Morrison's methods because she had been the victim of similar credit theft earlier in her career. Several classified operations that she had planned and executed had been officially credited to male officers who had taken her ideas and presented them as their own. The difference was that Claire's current assignment gave her the authority and resources to gather evidence that could be used to expose Morrison's corruption. The mission that would ultimately bring down Morrison's career was Operation Steel Phoenix, a classified counterterrorism operation that Claire had designed and commanded 6 months before her assignment to Morrison's unit. The operation had been a remarkable success, eliminating a terrorist cell that had been planning attacks against American military installations while rescuing hostages who had been held for over a year. Operation Steel Phoenix had been so successful that it had attracted attention from senior military leadership and Defense Department officials who were looking for operations to highlight in congressional testimony and public relations campaigns. The classified nature of the operation meant that public credit could not be given to the actual participants, but internal military recognition was still valuable for career advancement and promotion opportunities. Morrison had learned about Operation Steel Phoenix through classified briefings that mentioned its success without identifying the commanding officer who had led the mission. His security clearance gave him access to operational summaries but not to detailed personnel records, so he knew about the mission's success without knowing that Claire Adams had been its commanding officer. When Morrison was selected to testify before a congressional committee about recent military successes in counterterrorism operations, he saw an opportunity to enhance his reputation by claiming credit for Operation Steel Phoenix. His testimony described the operation in general terms while strongly implying that he had been responsible for its planning and execution, though he was careful to avoid making explicit false claims that could be easily disproven. Morrison's congressional testimony was widely reported in military publications and defense industry media, establishing him as a leading expert on counterterrorism operations and positioning him for promotion to higher command positions. The success of his testimony led to speaking engagements, consulting opportunities, and recognition within military circles as an innovative tactical thinker. Claire watched Morrison's rise to prominence based on her accomplishments with growing anger and frustration, but she was constrained by the classified nature of her actual role in Operation Steel Phoenix and her ongoing undercover investigation. She could not publicly challenge Morrison's claims without compromising her current mission and potentially endangering other classified operations. The breaking point came when Morrison was nominated for promotion to Brigadier General, with Operation Steel Phoenix specifically cited as evidence of his exceptional leadership and tactical innovation. The promotion would not only reward Morrison for stealing Claire's accomplishments but would also put him in position to continue his pattern of corruption at higher levels of military command. Claire's decision to expose Morrison required her to violate the operational security protocols that had protected her classified missions for years. She knew that revealing her role in Operation Steel Phoenix would end her undercover investigation and potentially compromise other ongoing operations. But she also understood that allowing Morrison to be promoted based on false claims would encourage similar corruption throughout the military. The confrontation between Claire and Morrison occurred during a command briefing where Morrison was presenting his promotion candidacy to senior officers who would influence the final decision. Morrison had prepared a detailed presentation about his accomplishments, with Operation Steel Phoenix featured prominently as evidence of his tactical expertise and leadership capabilities. Morrison's presentation included classified details about Operation Steel Phoenix that he had obtained through his security clearance, and he described the mission's planning and execution in terms that strongly implied he had been personally responsible for its success. His description was technically accurate, but deliberately misleading, creating the impression that he had commanded the operation without explicitly making false claims. When Morrison finished his presentation and asked for questions, Claire stood up from her position in the back of the briefing room. The other officers in attendance were surprised to see a staff sergeant preparing to question a general's promotion candidacy, and Morrison himself looked annoyed at what he assumed would be an inappropriate interruption from a subordinate. Claire's response was calm and professional, but her words carried an impact that stunned everyone in the room. She simply said, "General Morrison, I'm curious about your description of Operation Steel Phoenix. Could you clarify your role in the mission planning phase, specifically your involvement in developing the hostage rescue protocols that were implemented during the final phase of the operation?" Morrison's confidence faltered slightly because Claire's question demonstrated a level of detailed knowledge about Operation Steel Phoenix that seemed impossible for someone of her rank and assignment. The hostage rescue protocols she mentioned were highly classified details that had not been included in the general briefings Morrison had attended, and her question suggested she had access to information that should have been far above her clearance level. Morrison attempted to deflect Claire's question by questioning her authority to ask for classified details during a promotion briefing, but Claire's response made it clear that she was not going to be intimidated or dismissed. She replied, "Sir, I'm asking because I was the commanding officer for Operation Steel Phoenix, and I'm interested in understanding how you were involved in a mission that I planned and executed." The room went completely silent as the implications of Claire's statement became clear. If she was telling the truth, then Morrison had been claiming credit for an operation he had never participated in. If she was lying, then she was committing career suicide by making false claims about classified operations in front of senior military leadership. Morrison's immediate response was to dismiss Claire's claim as impossible, pointing out that her rank and assignment made it inconceivable that she could have commanded a classified special operations mission. He demanded that she provide evidence to support her assertion or face disciplinary action for making false statements about classified operations. Claire's response was to reach into her briefing folder and produce a classified mission summary that bore her signature as commanding officer of Operation Steel Phoenix. The document was authenticated with security markings that proved its legitimacy, and the details it contained matched Morrison's own description of the mission while clearly identifying Claire as the officer responsible for its success. The senior officers in the briefing room were stunned as they realized that Morrison had been claiming credit for an operation commanded by a staff sergeant sitting in the back row. The implications went far beyond a single case of stolen credit to suggest a pattern of corruption that had been hidden throughout Morrison's career. Morrison's attempt to discredit Claire's documentation failed when other officers in the briefing room confirmed that the security markings on her mission summary were legitimate and that the operational details she provided matched classified reports they had seen through their own clearance channels. Morrison's claims about his role in Operation Steel Phoenix were revealed to be completely fabricated. The investigation that followed Claire's exposure of Morrison's false claims revealed the full scope of his pattern of credit theft and corruption. Military investigators discovered that Morrison had systematically claimed credit for at least 12 classified operations that had been commanded by other officers, most of whom were women who had been transferred or forced out of military service after their accomplishments were stolen. Morrison's promotion candidacy was immediately withdrawn, and he was placed under investigation for making false statements about his military record, fraudulent claims for recognition and awards, and systematic misconduct in his treatment of subordinate officers. The evidence that Claire's revelation had uncovered was so extensive that it led to criminal charges as well as military discipline. Claire's role in exposing Morrison's corruption required her to reveal her classified background and end her undercover investigation, but the evidence she had gathered during her 18 months in Morrison's command provided prosecutors with detailed documentation of his systematic corruption. Her sacrifice of her covert status had been necessary to prevent Morrison's promotion and to expose a pattern of misconduct that affected dozens of other soldiers. The court-martial proceedings against Morrison revealed the full scope of his career-long pattern of stealing credit from subordinate officers, with particular focus on his systematic targeting of female soldiers, whose accomplishments he could claim without significant resistance. The case became a landmark prosecution that led to significant changes in how military achievements are documented and verified. Morrison's conviction resulted in his dismissal from military service, forfeiture of his pension and benefits, and criminal penalties that included substantial fines and imprisonment. The case also led to reviews of other promotions and recognition that had been based on Morrison's false claims, with several awards and commendations being reassigned to the officers who had actually earned them. Claire's courage in exposing Morrison's corruption came at significant personal cost, as her revelation of her classified background ended her career in covert operations and required her to transition to acknowledged military service where her identity and accomplishments could be publicly recognized. However, her actions prevented Morrison from continuing his pattern of corruption at higher levels of command and provided justice for the dozens of soldiers whose accomplishments he had stolen. The recognition that Claire eventually received for her actual military accomplishments was substantial and included medals and commendations that had been delayed for years due to the classified nature of her operations. Operation Steel Phoenix and her other classified missions were acknowledged through appropriate channels, and she received the recognition that Morrison had been falsely claiming. Claire's transition from covert operations to acknowledged military service was successful, and she was promoted to positions that reflected her actual experience and accomplishments rather than the false identity she had maintained during her undercover assignment. Her case became an example of how military justice could address corruption even when it involved senior officers with significant political and institutional protection. Morrison's downfall had broader implications for military culture and the systems used to verify accomplishments and qualifications for promotion. The case led to enhanced verification procedures for military achievements and increased protection for service members who report misconduct by superior officers, particularly in cases involving gender discrimination and credit theft. The investigation that Morrison's exposure triggered revealed that his pattern of corruption was not unique and that similar cases of stolen credit and false claims existed throughout various levels of military command. Claire's courage in speaking up had exposed not just individual corruption, but institutional weaknesses that allowed such misconduct to continue undetected for years. Claire Adams learned that sometimes the most important military operations are the ones that happen in briefing rooms rather than battlefields, and that courage sometimes means sacrificing career opportunities to ensure that truth and justice prevail over corruption and deception. Her willingness to end her own covert career to expose Morrison's false claims demonstrated that honor and integrity were more important than personal advancement or career protection. The general who had called her useless discovered that the staff sergeant he had dismissed and humiliated was actually more accomplished and decorated than he would ever be, and that his entire career had been built on a foundation of lies that could be destroyed by a single moment of truth. Claire's revelation of a mission number had indeed ended everything for Morrison, but it had also begun a new chapter of accountability and justice that would benefit countless other soldiers whose accomplishments deserved proper recognition. Some careers are built on truth and accomplishment, and others are built on deception and theft. Claire Adams proved that eventually, authentic achievement will expose false claims, and that courage to speak truth to power can overcome even the most entrenched corruption. Her story became a reminder that real military heroes are often found in unexpected places, and that sometimes the most powerful weapon against injustice is simply stating the facts clearly and refusing to be silenced.